So what do we have in our gospel reading today? We have the Beatitudes. Jesus' great teaching of the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes which deserve a thorough and detailed evaluation, perhaps through a long and drawn-out homily. But that's not the approach I'm going to take today. Rather, I found myself drawn to our first reading from the prophet Zephaniah. Zephaniah, an Old Testament writer whose writings are only 3 chapters, or roughly 3 pages in a modern-day Bible. Not that much writings from Zephaniah, but I found myself drawn to Zephaniah regardless. And particularly, I found myself drawn to Zephaniah's words of being sheltered on the day of the Lord's anger and taking refuge in the name of the Lord. Being sheltered, taking refuge. These are themes that really resonate with us today and at this moment. Why? Because we live in a time, we live in a place, we live in a world where we're constantly bombarded by difficulties and tragedies. Climate change, war, wrongful death, sickness, inflation, not to mention the indifference that we often experience in our relationships and in our institutions, in our schools and in our workplaces. But I found myself drawn to Zephaniah regardless. We seek shelter. We look for protection. We look for security. And instead of heeding Zephaniah's words in taking refuge in the name of the Lord, we often look elsewhere. In distractions, in material possessions, in accomplishments, in our own self-help solutions to our problems. But we know deep down that these types of fixes are just temporary and fleeting and will leave us with the same problems and looking for a different fix. What we need is a different perspective on the problems that plague us, as well as the true solution to those problems. And we find those by looking back to the Beatitudes. What do the Beatitudes tell us? Things aren't going to be easy. You will hunger and thirst. You will be meek. You will be persecuted. You will be insulted. But for all these things, Jesus gives us something positive. See, the problems that we face are temporary and will be replaced by something and someone greater. That something and someone greater is Jesus and his kingdom. See, when we follow Jesus in the difficult moments of our lives, when we stay with him, we are promised a piece of his kingdom, his everlasting kingdom that will overcome and outweigh whatever difficulties we experience. Now, that doesn't mean that we should ignore the problems that face us. Rather, we should, in following Jesus, take in his words, take in his examples, take in his teachings, and go to the places where he was, and imitate him in doing the things that he did to the best of our ability. This is truly the shelter and the refuge that we seek. Really, the only shelter and the only refuge. So this is the conflicting beauty of the Beatitudes. We will experience the problems of the world. They're not going to go away. But in Jesus, with Jesus, and through Jesus, we are given the promise and the long-term solution, no matter how small our contribution might be. To give us that shelter and that refuge that we seek, the only shelter and the only refuge that will help us weather the storm and share in God's kingdom.